Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I wanted to speak about internal shifts of the outer behavior. You know, we human beings are not just creatures that have ideas, we are creatures that act upon our ideas. And the type of idea we have will suggest what kind of, actions we input into the system of life so life can have a response to. So what I mean by that is everybody in a strange way is a creator of their karma, or at least they create how they receive what happens to them. So think of it as if there is a vehicle, like a person sitting in a car, and their decision of how much to press on the gas, how much to press on the brakes, and how much to look outside of the eyes, look outside of the window, suggests their destiny. It's hilarious. That means sometimes the outcome of the driver in the vehicle depends on how much the driver has paid attention to the outer realm. And we find this in our modern world in the sense of, a lot of religious people, when they get sick, they in some sense go to the outer realms to be treated. That means faith, of course. That is one component of the religious mindset that is very, very fixed. But when it comes to I'm just saying that our progress in the outer realms helps our inner realms. The human being that is afraid of, the ending of this life, in some sense, the outer realms provide a sort of contentment, comfort, One contentment, I'll be honest, that the outer realms provides. This is something where I was thinking about my own transition out of this realm. And I suddenly noticed that when I die, the world will still be here. And that was the strangest thought. Usually the idea of death is a sad one, but the idea of there being endless types of human beings being born into the system and contributing to it, that's strangely like a satisfying thought that, a person in this life may fail, but the species will not. The species has a greater chance not to. And really what it is this vehicle analogy is actually a perfect analogy. Whether the vehicle is a car, or the vehicle is a giant robot, or the vehicle is a species. The vehicle could be Earth. Buckminster Fuller and Marshall McLuhan, they called it Spaceship Earth. Technically we're in a spaceship, but we're not controlling it. The forces of nature are controlling it. The driver in the vehicle may be oblivious to what's coming in the road if it pays attention to the window, the front window. It will get a certain range of information, and then from its side windows, from the side mirrors and the back mirror, you try to fulfill the total information of the moment. So as a driver, you see a landscape, you have access to a certain range of sight, and you're moving in that sight, And what's remarkable, I mean, this pretty much falls into Einstein's explanation, you know, of light, but there is something very fascinating that when a person drives, you could be driving in the highway, like, you know, 100 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, and as you're driving, you know, let's say 90 kilometers per hour in the highway, the vehicle is in the outer realms going 90 in front. Outside of the vehicle, you're moving at 90 kilometers per hour, but inside the vehicle, you're just like sitting on a chair, just moving a steering wheel. And I find that the experience of the mind within the body is very similar to that. It has its own stillness in the inner realms, so it can't get too overwhelmed by the speed it's going in the outer realms. But at the same time, if the outer realms makes a mistake, if vehicles collide, then the inner realm is at a sort of danger point, you know. When I talk about internal shifts of the outer behavior, our outer behavior is a vehicle, right? But we think it's us. I would say, you know, I would take this a little bit extreme, and I would say there is no such thing as personalities. There has just been vehicles of expression, of ideological expression. And what we really think is the person is a movement. Like, this can't be ignored. So now this vehicle metaphor goes a certain amount, you know. After some point I can't use it because of the complexity of human psychology. Human psychology can be absent to itself, you know, but the vehicle, a person driving a vehicle can't jump out of the vehicle, you know. For example, yogis and these mystics who would go into caves and they would go into samadhi states and meditative states for like such a long time that their biological body would just stay, you know, as if they would connect their phone to the charger, to the energy of the universe, you know, and then they would just, it didn't matter how much the phone was being used or how the phone was being used. Everybody has an inner life and an outer life. We tend to be so obsessed in performing properly in our outer life that we don't really care to look at the inner life. That means most people on this planet are winging their inner life. That means they see that it's as if like the outer life is a sort of show, a sort of global theater. And in this global theater, you know, some people have recognized they are actors and some people have recognized they are not actors. That means they still believe in themselves, just like object worship, you know. Back in the day there was idol worship, now there is ideal worship. And it's only philosophers who are not worshipping anything. I would say any other classification, you know, they need a sort of fixated conclusion of the knowledge, right? So science comes and says, how is knowledge absolute in accordance to objectivism, you know? But philosophers are looking at objectivism and noticing that there's a subjectivism simultaneously, and the subjectivism is not absolute and changes quicker than the objectivism. So how can we just, poetically absolutize, you know, objectivism? You know, that means if we were an object, we shouldn't be moving, you know. Michael C in the chat section says idol worship equals ideal worship. I wouldn't say so, even though it's a good observation, right? Let me tell you, they are similar in regards to they are both. They are equal if you look at them from the eyes of the person worshiping. Sure, the person's attention is caught by an object, the person's attention is caught by a subject, right? You know, so it's like people worshipped, you know, physical things, like a tree used to be a god back in the day to some cultures, you know. or the sun used to be a god, for example, to the Egyptians, that, that would, the sun is very hard to say, because it's so far away. The objective reality is through light. So I would say believing the sun is a god is a sort of color worship of an idea, What I'm trying to say is that one is in the outer realms, one is in the inner realms. That's why, Michael, I'm saying that they're not equal, right? That means me thinking that I am just my body, and that being an absolutist view, and me considering just the idea of me. I could totally be like, this world is a tough place. Screw it. It's just I'll be a solipsist from today, and everything is just my subjective reality. I'll be honest. There's something more than language. If there wasn't something more than language, we would all stay ideal worshippers, and we would have no way of getting out of it. But because there's an experiential dimension to the human being, there is a truth here that surpasses our containment of it. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's why the internal and the outer shift. That means if it snows, in my inner reality, I'll be like, how about a jacket? If it's suddenly dry and I'm teleported to some desert scenario, I'll be like, how about some water? You see, the inner responds to the outer. And usually most life is lived like that, where the outer world is changing, and that causes you to change internally. As the poet Rumi says, when I was younger, I wanted to change the world, but now that I'm older, I want to change myself, That could break the record of the fastest Rumi quote ever. So what it means is that we have two options. Either we use energy, a lot of energy, to change the outer realms, or we use a little bit of energy to change the inner realms. A person can go change the highway they're driving on, or the person can change or the person can change the vehicle. Can you imagine driving, and then halfway while you're driving, like your neighboring car beside you in the highway, its window is open, and you feel like Neo from the Matrix, and you jump from your car into another person's car, just for the fun of it, not even for some intense scenario, Or imagine in the future, I predict that there will be a sort of unique cultural revolution when jetpacks, and they're not called jetpacks, but jetpacks in the future enter, Jetpacks are gonna blow people's minds, simply because it's gonna create the worst kind of road rage. If cars are still, if we have built jetpacks before we have kind of established flying cars, it will create the craziest road rage. Can you imagine driving and you're just in traffic, in a traffic jam, stuck, and then like 10 let's say jetpackers for now, 10 jetpackers just literally, they hop on the roof of your car and they bounce back into the air, you know what I mean? Like and you see someone shouting from their car, it's like, that's a felony, don't, jetpack on my car, Simply, I'm just trying to say, we have to discriminate between the inner realms and outer realms. Anybody who's heard these Mr.Within talks, that's all I'm really saying. I'm just a person who's noticed as if our intelligence is functioning in an unconditional dimension, in the sense that behind our eyes there is no limits. In front of my eyes, I can't do a backflip. I just can't, But behind my eyes, do you know how many backflips I've done? Do you know how many times I've flown in the world I've seen? Right, so in regards to the inner realms, there's a malleability. That's why I'm saying internal shifts of the outer behavior. Now, this internal shifts of the outer behavior, it doesn't just happen. There aren't just examples for it in regards to the human idea, there's an example, a great example of it in nature. Pretty much it really relates to our ancestry as an animal. You see, chimps, do something strange. I mean, of course, we gotta say, like, if life is 50% body stuff, physical stuff, and it's 50% mind stuff, 50% non-physical stuff, right? In the development of the non-physical identity blueprints of the individual, if we were to look at, for example, chimps, we'll notice something interesting. We'll notice that young chimps, they go to older chimps in like the collective. I'm speaking about animal psychology here specifically, not human psychology, which is advanced animal psychology. So what chimps do is that younger chimps, they grab a stick and they go poke the older chimps in, like, the group. That's something that young chimps do, They are mammals, of course, are playful. Mammals are like animals that are warm-blooded. They are interaction-based, to a degree that people have even, like there was this scientist who had, this very important person, I forget his name though, unfortunately, he had discovered that rats laugh. He had discovered that there was laughter in smaller animals, That means when a rat steals a piece of cheese, it's like laughing in its mind. And of course, guys, these are just examples of, inferior species kind of mimicking something that we as a more advanced species are doing. That means I'm not calling people rats, but I'm just saying, I'm like, rats laugh. Like, what do we do about that? Can you imagine the world is pushed into some, oblivion of a conversation? We're like, what does it mean that when rats laugh? What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, the whole species freaks out. Anyways, younger chimps, they grab a stick, they go poke the elder chimps. These younger chimps, as they grow up, as they become to a position, now check out what happens to their inner reality. Their inner reality incorporates what was something that was a game when they were young, becomes a sort of test of dominance, right? So what maturity does to the animal is that introduces itself to an intensity of the previous archetypes that it's roamed in. So what in some sense growth I consider it to be is how in the outer realms, first the inner realms and the outer realms are independent. The child doesn't care about the world, and the world really, the type of world we live in really doesn't care about children now. Because if it did, it would change the educational system. Because the educational system is the same as before, I would say this world really doesn't care about children. I mean, there are, of course, compared to ancient times, of course, like we have evolved so much. We have progressed so much. But when it comes to how the inner life of the individual is becoming or somehow framing towards the outer life, there is a huge issue. Because after, I would say, the age of 50, or I shouldn't say the age of 50, let's say from the age of 10 to 30, from the age of 10 to 30 of the human being, or let's say 40, 10 to 40. From the ages of 10 to 40, there is an outer realm energy accessible, which as the person goes above the age of 40, the outer realm energy diminishes and the person grounds more as a psychological entity rather than a physiological entity only. The chimp updated its psychology to treat something that it treated as a game before as a serious reality, right? And that's what happens when life's intensity, or what people call suffering, when a sort of intensity of the turbulence of the outer realms arises, when there is suffering in the outer realms, the person's inner realm has to retaliate, has to respond. And if the person fails, that means if the outer realms convinces you of who you are more than the inner realms, that's when we say a person is hopeless, because hope is an inner phenomenon. Hope is an inner force. And human beings update differently. That means if we take it as if we are all creatures that get access to a certain range of information, then based on our unique DNA, we do something to that information. That means every person's DNA, unique DNA, is a unique filter of reality, both the outer realms and the inner realms. And if the person has experiences where, I was hearing something so incredible from Jordan Peterson that it just shocked me. It was such an incredible thing he shared in one of his lectures, where he's like, of course, mammals that are warm-blooded, they play. So keep that idea in your mind for a second, that mammals play. Now, in human psychology, Jordan Peterson is an incredible psychologist, and he says that children at a very young age, who their parents don't play with them, or what he called rough and tumble play, these children end up becoming awkward in civilization. Why? Because at a young age, where they should have been in some sense receiving in their inner realms movement and playing with the world without a care in the world, really, right? From that, it's like when that stage goes missed, the person becomes, you could say introverts are pretty much lonely children, children who didn't get to play enough. I shouldn't say lonely children. I mean, like, from the Buddhic perspective, we're all alone when it comes to our own minds. We all have to deal with not our problems, but also the answers to our problems, which are energy and intelligence responding to the moment. So it is very important that if there is at a certain age in youth, the child plays and then learns to trust the outer realms, right? The child will not have issues in communication. The way my life personally happened was that I did not trust the outer realms, and I was on the borderline of my thoughts going towards loving and hating the world, but it didn't go to hate. It didn't go to hate because I was honest enough to realize I didn't know anything. That honesty to realize you don't know anything can save a person from the psychology of dominance. Because we right now have created a society where the loudest person and the most violent and strongest person is being considered as the ultimate, right? But we haven't realized we're being ushered into an era of minds, and this animal is not evolving only from within. The outer realms are suggesting how much it needs to adjust to, right? We say survival of the fittest, right? Darwin came and shouted at us, that this creature is surviving. And in its attempts to survive, there is the concept of adaptation, and through the concept of adaptation, it evolves gradually over time, right? And of course, Darwin hadn't looked at butterflies, because the caterpillar's evolution into a completely total creature happens very quickly. But the human being, a creature of a bigger mass, it takes longer and longer. And we could even treat the planet as a giant creature that it takes so long for it to evolve that we can never notice it evolving. So we are surviving, and we're trying to survive in the fittest way. Now, there was a person by the name of Maslow. I forget his first name, but Maslow, he creates this idea called Maslow's hierarchy, and pretty much he looks at the social animal, and he's wondering about what does the social animal go towards. And the beginning of human life is really like Castaway, like the movie Castaway, Survivor Island kind of scenario, where every human being, before really they can have a true appreciation of their mind, they must satisfy the desires of the body, not the desires, the physiology. Why? Because if your body is taking your attention, the person's attention to their mind will be out of their control. So you can say somebody who feels they don't have an imagination is someone who the outer realms have kept them so busy they cannot even consider a new angle to that idea. Imagination, if we were antennas, it belongs to no one. It's just when the antenna can pick up a signal, it picks up a signal. And what is sensory perception? It is signal reception. And what is free will? Signal expression. My whole thing is trying to figure out where the inner life of the human being is going. The outer life, super obvious. Just stay on the planet as long as you can. You know, that's the goal. You know, and try to live high quality while you're still here. That means aim for the greatest while you're alive, because you can only attempt for the greatest while you're alive. So that's the outer realm's destination. It is just self-continuity. And what's hilarious is that we didn't, right now, we're not trying to keep the tradition of walking on our four limbs alive, right? When we stood on our two legs, we forgot about walking on four limbs. But the issue is, the moment we evolve to a conscious platform, we have actually attached ourselves to the biology. So the moment there's an awareness to the inner biology, it's like a moment where we actually got enlightened from the body. So any person who right now has a mind, poetically, from a standpoint of reincarnation, you have in some sense like the snowball effect. You know, your attention has been exposed to the dimensions of the mind. You know, this is why it's very strange, but it's an incredible system of thought. In Buddhist and yogic thought, if a person does something wrong, or their attention goes on something that is not the real nature, they incarnate as that. What does that mean? That means all the people in the on the battlefield who were shouting and with hatred they wanted to kill each other, it's like, you can say poetically, it's like the incarnation into savagery. You choose the domain of your perception. I'm not kidding when I say this, right? Because why do we have a free will? If we didn't have a free will, then it would be like no problem, because nature's doing everything. But because we have free will, right? We have a free will in defining the problem and the solution. And seldom is this said, that the state of consciousness the problem arises is different than the state of consciousness the answer arises. And street smart people know this. Street smart people know that if from the way the question has come, the answer has to be a different way of the reality being held in the moment. Because if the reality is held in the same way, the problem is still there. An example of this is like, let's say two people fight, you know, and then 10 years, 20 years passes, and those two people still, you know, they behave towards each other as if they were the past. And that's, in some sense, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch when human beings think they can know each other. Ultimately, the world is a system of movement. This system of movement appears as Purusha Prakriti. Purusha is consciousness. Prakriti, if I remember correctly, is matter. So what that means is, the only reason I am saying the inner reality having a relationship with the outer reality, because our outer reality appears in the space of our mind, which is the awareness to the world, right? The fact that we know we are here is the miracle. That is the biggest miracle of consciousness. And we have to create a social system that that enables experience to advance. That means anytime a caterpillar wants to become a butterfly, the advanced civilization must allow that, because freedom is not just being able to do things, it's also having the skill to do things successfully. Right now, I don't control this rain that is really getting close to my laptop, That's in the outer realms, And if I interpret the rain as something bad, anytime it rains, the person's psychology goes into a state of, the inner realms just feels less than it can. The elements are truly at work. I mean, it's such a beautiful elemental reality with depth, with color, with shape, I often say, if you were a designer, you're in heaven. This world is filled with endless designs, and anybody who seeks the beauty of design will eventually pull the strings to the mystery of the realm, because it's all design. All that knowledge is looking at geometry and managing it in regards to how we classify it to ourselves. That means knowledge is not just having information, it's what you do with that information. And when we try to think about what do we mean by what do you do with information, it's like how everything you see fits into all that you have seen so far. Really, that's knowledge, isn't it? I would say from a street smart angle, we're just trying to figure out the most important factors of change in any moment, and we respond to those. And by nature, we're designed to do this. Why? Because when there's an emergency, we care. A person can act like, whatever ego. They can act careless. They can act like they're an emotionless, mechanical juggernaut, but I will tell you it's impossible. Anytime life is pushed into intense levels of experience, it in some sense, the speed of the inner realms have to speed up, So it's as if just like how we care for our body, our biological body to remain in this world, we have to care also for our subjective embodiment. And our subjective embodiment changes again so much more quicker than our objective embodiment. There is freedom, and yet the expression of freedom at its most advanced stages will be impingement. So unless there's a multidimensional framework, we will not be able to have a concept of freedom in the future. Simply because we're 8 billion individuals, each has their own universe of the universe, own view, their inner universe is viewing the outer universe in their own way, based on their memories and exposure to their world so far. And so, the release of artificial reality is from within. Life is incredible, One moment it makes you feel you're at the epitome of creation. Then another moment it makes you feel you're at the bottom of creation, Then another moment it makes you feel as if you are looking through the eyes of the divine. Then another moment it makes you feel like you have already fallen before divinity was there, right? So this world is endless engagements and endless simulations. That would have been another great title for this episode as well. Endless simulations and endless worlds, really. It's an endless world. It's like a person counting the sands on the beach, but now instead of sounds, it's every phenomena that we objectivize poetically. We turn into an object. That's what the mind is doing. The eyes have access to objective reality. The mind's like, oh, what am I made of? And it's like it uses the information from the objective reality. So most likely what is happening right now in 2021 in people's imagination is that the outer realms is echoing flexibly for most people. That means if somebody sees somebody jump in a certain way in their inner realms, they can start to fathom it. Or for example, when I speak a certain way, that activates like a manner of speech for example, viewers. I've talked to people who I can tell to some degree that it's like when the speed of communication enhances, that means certain freedoms have been attained in the inner realm territory. And there has been certain victories in the inner realm, victories of perception that free the being in accordance to trying out its ability for the first time. Because really, nobody knows who they are. That's the way this world is designed. It's designed where we, first of all, we have a first-person point of view. That means our eyes are not designed on the top of our head. Like, how there's... our eyes is not like a camera above our heads giving us a three-dimensional view. We are designed to be, believe it or not, a two-dimensional viewer. But because we are moving through so much, the two-dimensional moves, it's three-dimensional, I would say. Something like that. Where it's as if I stop moving, life is a picture. If I move, then it becomes a film. Right? So that means on some level, reality is being a picture if you don't move. Think of it like a statue and a person, right? So it's being a conceptual statue. A person can see what sort of inner realms they are bestowed. It's another way of saying where I like to frame the idea to position the idea in a way where everybody has access to a hidden instrument. A hidden way where the inner realms and the outer realms, like a symphony orchestra, are synchronized towards a sort of, not the ultimate expression, but the ultimate ability of the expression. So if you treat yourself as an instrument, I'll use myself as an example. I'm just this person, being like, all right, I'm a creature in a world, eyes have opened, and I'm going by. And then, based on what I am, what I have access to, I play this instrument of intelligence. And that is it. Living is literally like you're playing an instrument. Now, some people say play it with humility, and there's other parts of society where they say play it with pride. That means it's like if we're a human being, we gotta own it. Own the idea of yourself. And you see all those. That we're currently in an era of motivational speakers, where the motivational speakers are pretty much putting their foot on the gas pedal. That's the way motivation is happening. Where people are like, just keep going, never stop, no surrender, no, I don't know, I don't remember the exact saying, but it's like if you don't surrender, victory will inevitably come. That means if in this lifetime, this is my strategy at least to this project, where this project is like a challenge of me trying to see if it's possible to give 10,000 talks in a lifetime. So for me, any time that I have available, in some sense where there is an important idea and I feel I can communicate it properly, I just put the effort there regardless of caring for the consequence, right? That's the modern way where we're being encouraged, just keep working hard. But when we are becoming more of a mind in our evolution, it's not about working hard anymore. It's about working smart and what working smart means is you actually seek information from the context first, then you try to move the concept you are, which is free will. That means most youth is way more interested in being a special context. Being a special concept. You see kids in school, that because it's a, you could say school is simulating society in a strange way. So in some sense, what I'm saying is like, energy it's like one energy being multiple things. We are one of those multiple things, and we are a unique multiplicity that can have the outer realm multiplicity echoing our inner realms. That means it's how much of an ontological question this is, what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like saying, where do we, just like Neil Armstrong planted the flag on the moon, it's like, where do we plant the flag of what a person is? Hear the question, ladies and gentlemen. What a person is, right? And from one angle, it takes us into considering that the person is an object. An object means that's what it is, But our experience of the object through sensation is internal. So it's as if, is a subject being an object? Is an object being a subject? And human beings are like, okay, society says subject is being an object. Let's go with that. But is that enough? What else do we have access to that we don't know about right now? Think about it. That there is so much humanity is not explored. So much. And if people think the educational system knows everything to teach, that's the biggest lie. The biggest flaw of the educational system is that it is trying to get students rather than trying to get explorers. It breaks my heart, how much exploration ability is being wasted. Children are educated on the past so they can prepare for the future. How stupid of an idea is that, The only thing that would prepare them for the future is training and instant activation of the content in the long-term memory. Because there's two types of memory. Most children go to, think of a more inefficient system where the children goes all these days to the educational system, but at the end of it, what does the child retain? It retains where its attention is going next. That means, do we need to teach people about all the destinations they can pilot to, or do we need to teach people how to pilot? Right? And the educational system's like, yeah, in the past people piloted that way, in the future they might pilot this way, and in the present, they're piloting now. But the past, the emphasis on the past is so much, right, that the person's like, I don't know who I am in the present, and if the past is telling who I am, and it's a deactivation of your free will in the illusion that you are being educated, right? So it means like there's an education, and I'm not saying the educational system is bad, guys. If you go read the history of the educational system, I'm saying it's inefficient. If you read the history of the educational system, it got possessed by the callings of war. The educational system could have been for knowledge's sake, but at the time of war, they're like, what kind of soldiers do we need? What kind of children are we raising in society, right? So during World War I and World War II, the educational system got possessed over national priority, right? And so it's like the educational system we find currently in many parts of the world, it is actually the remnant of the gift that the British Empire left the world. Right? And the way it was, in some senses, it was as if like soldiers during the era of Morse code where Morse code was an active technology, had to go from one bunker, exactly remembering the orders, the reports, the commands, the instructions, instantly memorizing it, and running to another bunker and sharing that information. This is why we have examinations, because knowledge, if it's truly knowledge, it can be learned any moment. There is no speed to it, unless it's specific knowledge for a specific system. But if it's universal knowledge, you are a student of the universe from the beginning of your life till its end. That means nobody has to go to an educational system to be a student. Nobody needs a teacher to be a student. The universe is information. Anytime information is being processed, it's like, where's the better student? You know? It's just that people have stopped wondering about the macrocosm. And so the microcosm scares the shit out of them. That's it. I felt in my youth, I was a person who I actually felt I was in the wrong world. I could say there was a sort of karmic quarantine in my youth. When I say karmic quarantine, that means my own inner realms were engaging the world in a way where I was inhibited, and it felt like universally intentional. It felt like in my youth my eyes had to skip some things, had to not engage in certain moments of realism, But years later I realized I had I don't know what the proper word is, inadvertently, I had indirectly bypassed my conditioning by feeling that I, in some sense, I'm not here for this world. Do you understand what I'm saying, dear listeners? I'm saying that there was a point in my psychology where I didn't feel this was my world. Because I didn't feel this was my world, I had no choice to be an observer as the inner realm. Okay, an incredible question in the chat section. Michael says, what would you teach a child? Math, reading, meditation. I've got 3 kids that could benefit from Mr.Within insight. First, it depends on the age of the kid, right? But I'm assuming you're talking about like young kids being born and what should they be taught entering this world, right? I would say, here's the thing. There's a poem you should read from Khalil Gibran. I'll read it for you. This poem is a way better answer than what I can tell you, okay? The kind of mindset this poem will leave you in, this poem by Khalil Gibran, this Lebanese genius and poet. To me, he's a genius, but anyway. Khalil Gibran, this poem on children. I'll read this for you. So first, hang this poem on your, in your room somewhere where you get to see. And of course, keep in mind, I'm a person who doesn't have kids, right? So I'm just someone who's giving you, as to the best of my ability, a sort of response, right? I would say that, so first I'll read this poem. I think this is worth it. And then I'll tell you my answer. So first, Khalil Gibran's answer. This poem on children was written by Khalil Gibran. And it's from this book called The Prophet. The book's title is called The Prophet. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, I'll read that again. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Yeah. Look at, Khalil Gibran understood. And what Khalil Gibran is saying in this poem is that children are not our objects of control, even though at first we have to raise them and care for them and help their survival, right? But they are not our object of identifying what we have. That means what I'm trying to say is like it's kind of like enlightened work where you are detached. It's like there's a warrior on a battlefield that is like he's attached to the idea of victory. It's like I have to be victorious, and the warrior is clumsy, makes mistakes, but goes forth that way. Then there is a warrior on the battlefield who, in their inner realm, they have already won. This warrior is already, let's say, the greatest mother, the greatest father in their inner realms, right? And in the outer realms, they just behave in accordance, where there is mastery involved. So I would say young children, they don't learn from concepts at that age. They learn from behaviors. So how the parent behaves, if the parent has moments where in front of the child, the parent gets angry, then sits still and silent for a couple of minutes and meditates. And the children are like, what is my angry parent doing? Or let's say the child does something wrong, expects the parent to get super angry. The parent, instead of unleashing a dehumanized anger on the child, the parent just for a second inhales deeply, just tries to, calm down, be mindful, and then respond, right? And the best thing we can teach children, really, I find, is to make them question why they are here, but not in a way that they feel overwhelmed by the question. I mean, that's important too. What it is there has to be trust, playfulness, and grace. And when I say grace, the younger the child is, the more the adults in the room have to change the reality they speak in, so the child doesn't feel like it's skipping, like it's being thrown into a future timeline it doesn't understand, right? That's why movies, for example, have ratings. Not because like you can't watch the movie, because the child doesn't know what to do with that image. And we're living in a globalized era where children are actually becoming adults as instantaneously as they have access to the information in the internet. They are seeing those archetypes, right? And so every parent, this is something where, I don't know, I mean, guys, like, this question, there's 100% better people to answer it than me, right? But I would say, in regards to the education, the behavior of the parent is important. And I don't have kids, but if I had kids, I'd totally talk to them about the inner realms and outer realms. That means imagine your kid comes home from school and the kid is not happy. I don't want to say it's not happy, but the kid is quiet. The kid is more quiet than usual. Let's say your son comes home and your son is quiet. And then the father's like, what happened in school today? And the kid's like, nothing happened, everything's fine, right? If I was in that scenario, I would say, hey, no. Tell me what is exactly going on in your inner realms. That means tell me how you were looking at the moment and how you approached it, or what is going on really with you, right? So there is that thing. But at the same time, there is this Spartan mentality where, just give your son a spear and throw him in the wilderness to kill a wolf while jumping backwards, and then, you'll see them grow up too, So depends how. There's so many different cultures. Evidently, the Dutch have a unique way of raising children too, I haven't looked into it that much, but it's like evidently a popular thing, And the idea is, this is especially important, not to simulate a world for the child that the moment the child leaves the parent, the child is like, yo, this world I've been living in has it. Like, we don't want children to be like Buddha, where like after they've grown up, they leave the empire and it's like, no way, the world worked totally differently than I did, than I thought the world was working, right? So that could be a sort of deception, right? So we don't want to deceive the youth. I think parents should be honest with children, but they should be honest with a sort of filtration so that the child's reality can engage the content. And something great, I would tell you, something my father did was that he had a library. He had a giant library, He had a lot of books in the house. And I remember being super young. I think I was like 11. And I went to that library and there was a book called Body, Mind, and Spirit. And at the age of 11, that book was there and the concepts in there. And I remember my English wasn't that good, so not that it wasn't that good, but it was like I had to read something over and over again for it to see like what this Elder Scroll said, you know what I mean? Like, I would say, Be a compassionate human being. Show your children that on this planet there are human beings that can control their state, that can be mindful, and a person can use communication to advance any scenario. That means people think the more you communicate, it's bad. Actually, no. The more a person communicates, the more real they become to the environment, So communication is key, and especially training young children to be able to be honest communicators. Like, what greater human being do you want in society? A human being that honestly sees what is going on in the outer realms, and they remain true to what they see in their inner realms. That means I'm not a person who's saying right now all my own ideas are like the absolute thing. I have not made my inner realms a dictator over the outer realms, but I understand free will is an inner phenomena, and usually people learn. How do they learn? They learn from being conscious of questions and then becoming conscious of the answers. So that means it's like let's say the child asks a question from the parent doesn't know. The parent goes with the child on an exploration project of the topic, and it's like, let's go see what that topic is, right? And you see, there are these incredible YouTube videos where they show these experts like physicists or quantum mechanics, people come in and on 5 levels explain a topic through 5 levels of difficulty, to 5 different types of audiences. I would say whenever any person is around children, they should be gentle, graceful, and in some sense, think of it this way. Think of children are candles where there is nothing covering the flame. There's no hand in a windy storm covering the flame of the candle, right? That means children can be dismissed and they can be rejected from reality if there is bad communication, or they communicate in a way where they feel they don't deserve to communicate in the world. I had to climb through that. I had to climb through that conditioning of my own psyche, right? But children can bypass that by being accepted. At the same time, something else that is important is that you don't want a child that never understands what losing is, right? That is really important, because then if that child will become emotionally turbulent. I remember when I was going to film school, there was this fellow classmate who was from Russia, and this was in Canada, in Canada, Toronto. I went to Toronto Film School, and there was this kid who he was trying to be like the ultimate warrior of the classroom, He was trying to do everything perfect, even if somebody spoke to him imperfectly. He would in some sense, his ego would shake and he would become cold-hearted, And so that's the danger of idealism. That means make sure your child doesn't get possessed by ideology, because if the child gets possessed by ideology, it can't discriminate between what is its free will and what is the ideology telling it to do. And sometimes when there is no answer, ask a question. When there is no question, wonder about what answer has been already given. It's really just questions and answers. Unknown landscape. And the first thing I would explain to children would be the known and the unknown. That means to understand your free will is your known territory, and there's unknown things that can happen. In some countries, like in Japan in 2016, I believe, there was that next level, like, messed up tsunami that kind of destroyed Japan, And it's like, what is that? How do you explain that to a child? Yes, son, in some parts of the world, the weather gets messed up and beyond people's free will and control and preparation, like a giant wave can destroy a city. And it's just honoring the presence of the individual. I think something that it's not limited to children. It's just something that human beings seek. Because we have an inner life, we want that inner life to be seen by someone other than us. Why? So that we know it existed. So acknowledging people and their psychology, that means, imagine in the future we have reached a point where it doesn't matter what kind of human being there is, every human being is considered as an unknown intelligent movement, and they can be great and they can be not great in regards to what they do, but everybody is an unknown mind moving in a known body. And that's why we should not fear the unknown. It's really our first home. Children are not born with an ability to have ideological association. They have experiential association with the shifts of the environment, and that means the body is the first language. There's a language of the body. I don't want to call it body language, but let's call it language body. We have a linguistic body. Or I shouldn't say it like that. I should say we have an intelligence before the importing of language into the child's psychology, a sensation-based thing. That means the moment consciousness, the child breathes after, the doctor takes it out of the womb and makes sure the engine of the lungs begin, with a tap on the back or something, But I feel doctors, that there's a specific term for it. I don't know the term, but it's like the doctor hits the child on the back. It's like, welcome to Earth, buddy. You know what I mean? And like the child's like, and the lungs begin animating. And there is no psychology yet, but there is awareness. That means the candle light is lit when the child is born. There is free will, And there's honestly the same thing in regards to, we have all these debates about pro-abortion. There's some debates that are pro-abortion. You see politicians speak. Like I've seen videos online where they talk about abortion and whatnot. And actually, at what point do we consider there to be a human being, right? At one point is the child in the womb a human being? And in some sense, physically, we have to. The only way we can find a resolve to this idea, to this dilemma, is to consider if we are choosing the free will as part of the explanation of individual humanhood, right? We can say a child in the mother's womb is a collective human, is part of another human being. The body of the mother is nourishing the existence of the child in the womb. But when the child is born, then it has an opportunity for free will. When the opportunity for free will, one gets closer to the opportunity of free will, then the child is becoming an individual human, Without free will, we're just world moving. Free will is huge. It's a huge part of the mystery of our divinity. Without free will, I wouldn't be able to give this talk. I would just respond to just my biology. There would be no additional dimension of perception that responds, to the biology or to the inner content. Because imagination is like another body in a dimension for us. When you realize your attention can instantly evoke thought. That means we are an antenna that at any moment, if it just concentrates, ideas pour in, because everything is in accordance to the geometric design of it interdependent. That means we're inside one giant geometrical movement, and anything we look at, eventually that geometry connects to the contextual geometry of the realm. So everything is connected to everything. That means a human being can start talking about a cup and end up talking about, the origin of the universe beyond perception, beyond sensory perception. So anyways, I hope, you got some sort of answer, Michael. And the inner, and you got to think of it this way: there are three parents. Actually, children are being raised by three parents. One parent is like, let's say, the mother. The other parent is the father. Then the other parent is the world. The world. That means the child can at any moment pick up information that the parent have no clue about. The parents have no clue about. So the parent has to be honest, right? Because if the children can see, the underlying overlay, they can see the context of the moment. It's as if every human being, on some level, looks at other human beings and it's like, what are they doing? What is that human being doing? We wonder about this. So there is empathy. And of course, as Jordan Peterson was saying, Michael, you got to be very playful with your kids. That means in order to develop the child's emotion, the child has to express. Playfulness is a state where the child trusts its expression. And really, it's engagement with the world, because the brain is like a muscle. And this muscle, the more it is used, the more it can do things. The more I give these talks, the more internal structures I have to communicate. Sometimes I think like the way I've chosen to express myself in this life, it's as if like after this lifetime I'm saying goodbye to language too. I'm saying a sort of serene goodbye, in the sense that once you notice the universal, then what is in the universe doesn't define the universe as much as what is observing the whole universe. And what is observing the whole universe is not an idea, it's not an object or a subject. At best, our access to it is being, right? And based on the intent, I would say the parent has for the day, the children will fill out that karma. So parents should realize children are writing their karma until the child can be conscious enough to, in some sense, become a pilot of its own karma. So be their unconditional ally, but also be their intelligent friend. Whoever is a parent, I would say, because that's what parents miss out. At some point they stop being friends. Right? And what I mean by that is that's where I've noticed a difference in Eastern culture and Western culture. In Western culture, there is an early dismissal of the family unit, from the family unit. In Eastern cultures, the family unit is like a giant, like all your cousins and relatives, they are like, they are like genetical supporters. Do you know what I mean? So it's important, right? Family is important in the sense that the child doesn't feel it can't have allies. Every person back in the day, that's how kingdoms survived. When kingdoms were at war, they're like, holy shit, kingdoms attacking me, attacking my kingdom. What do? I go to the other kingdoms, And anybody who's interested in royalty, they should read this book by Niccolo Machiavelli called The Prince. It's such an incredible book. It's like, I've read certain parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing, but it is so magnificent, And really what it is we're bringing advanced communicators for an advanced civilization. I mean, that's the answer I can tell you ultimately. That's it. To me, I appreciate humanism. I'm a person who has cultivated enough gentleness to not judge something and understand something first, then judge it or share a comment on it. But I'll tell you, ultimately, I really don't have an opinion on people's personalities. That means there is no more good or bad personalities. To me, it's just expression that either has been here before or is new. So it's like we have to just pretty much innovate psychology by by making it into a transportation analogy, by giving it a transportation analogy. That means the person doesn't feel they are just their mind, they are piloting through their state of mind. And something in my youth, I wish like somebody had told me, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and tell myself, hey man, your emotions change in accordance to all the rooms you enter. So it's not that people are emotional, it's just that new environments evoke new settings behind our eyes, which are emotions, our feelings, or a reaction to the change of the moment, you know? So anyways, let me wrap this up. In the subtitle, when I talk about the movement of virtue, I would say, I remember reading this book where it was, this book on yoga, where it was talking about two types of virtue. And one type of virtue is the virtue of the innocence of children. What that means is all new human beings to the system, why are they innocent? They're innocent because they don't know any better. Right? So anytime it's like expecting your a parrot to talk. The parrot looks at you and it doesn't know any better. It may be able to copy paste, but it may not be able to. It doesn't know any better, right? So there are human beings that are functioning in this human system and they don't know any better. And then you can say there are human beings that they know better and they get exposed to the intense dimensions of the system, and so they lose their innocence. And when the person loses their innocence, that is in some sense what we call social maturity, believe it or not. But now, so when the person loses their virtue, society thinks that the person has become mature. But really, the second type of virtue is how the person, after losing their virtue, attains it and has the experience of the journey of transformation. So the first type of virtue of the innocence of the child doesn't have the experience of the journey of transformation, right? But the second type does, right? And the second type, it connects also to a Jungian theme where Carl Jung was like, the person confronts their shadow, and upon being fearless about their truth, or not about their truth, but in regards to the origin of their truth and who they are, they integrate the shadow. Rather than destroy, rather than get rid of, we are integrating our strategies, which are our psychological simulations of meaning, and we are in some sense looking at the world. A person can have a system of thought, let's say a system of approach to the ideological approach to the moment, where that ideological approach may not fit in. It doesn't fit into the macro puzzle piece of the context of the outer realms, right? So the person, instead of getting rid of it, now has a spectrum where all the states of mind and experiences you go through, they're creating a dictionary of how to be a human being for you. You know? Like, that can't be ignored. I'll read a few more quotes on virtue and I'll end this off. So those people who are virtuous, keep listening. All right, Marcus Aurelius. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, therefore guard accordingly, and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature. Baruch Spinoza. Happiness is a virtue, not its reward. Francois de la Rochefoucauld says hypocrisy is the homage vice pays to virtue. Marcus Tullius Cicero, this is a quote I've written in the description of the video, glory follows virtue as if it were its shadow. This to me is like an algorithm. It's an algorithm to victory, where you have to honor all the states of your perception, not having an attachment to sub-narratives of warfare. You know, what I mean by sub-narratives of warfare is that life is like one movement, but this one movement, like a cake, can be cut into pieces, and then each piece can be seen as its own movement, and the person's life can get occupied with one piece of one giant cake. But if you were to look at the whole thing as one giant cake, you wouldn't miss a piece, you know? So virtue and having that honesty with your own eyes is like, I would say it's the key, you know. Elon Musk says patience is a virtue, and I'm learning patience. It's a tough lesson. Maya Angelou says courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. And you know what courage is? It's concentration until action develops. It's like you're zooming into something, and you've zoomed into a point where you can do something about it. And that possibility, it's like there's no longer an emotional fear or courage theme to the moment. It's just a strategy can be implemented, a system can move in a certain way, and you just go with it with an honest attempt. Anyways, this is one man's voice. Dante Alighieri says, consider your origins. You were not made to live as brutes, but to follow virtue and knowledge. That means virtue has such an important role. It's our humanism. That means to be human means we are behaving different than all the other species here, and we have to value that difference, you know. Max Planck says all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter. And if I remember correctly, Max Planck wrote scientific equations on antimatter. I think he was the author of the antimatter equation. I could be wrong. Let me double check this. But I know Max Planck has this quote where he says, if there is an equation, scientific equation that is going to explain the whole universe, it has to be a beautiful one, you know. In modern physics, antimatter is defined as matter that is composed of the antiparticles. No, hold on. Oh, sorry, yeah, it's not antimatter, it's electromagnetism. Yeah. Anyways, he's an epic scientist, a silent person who was a genius behind his eyes. Let's keep going with the quote tunnel. Winston Churchill, socialism is a philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. Its inherent virtue is the equal sharing of misery. Holy shit. You know, Churchill's going all out there, you know. Petrarch says, rarely do great beauty and great virtue dwell together. Maya Angelou says, one isn't necessarily born with courage, but one is born with potential. Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be kind, true, merciful, generous, or honest. Charles Baudelaire says, it is time to get drunk, so as not to be martyred slaves of time. Get drunk without stopping on wine, on poetry, or on virtue as you wish. So he's being poetic. He's saying, you know, we're here once. That means enjoy the quality of life, seek the greater. And you know what's really fascinating? Fun is not a concept, it's a state. I should say it's not a concept, it's not tangible, it's a state of being, it's a quality, right? The success could be a quality, but there is no, in accordance to the psychology of the person, how can there be success in an infinitely changing world? It's all self-proclamation of meaning. So we have to, in some sense, just become aware of the antenna rather than the content defining the ability of the antenna all the time. Jacob Rees-Mogg says, patience is a virtue. Virtue is a grace.
John Henry Newman says virtue is its own reward and brings with it the truest and highest pleasure. But if we cultivate it only for pleasure's sake, we are selfish, not religious, and we will never gain the pleasure because we can never have the virtue. Richard Rohr says the theological virtue of hope is the patient and trustful willingness to live without closure, without resolution, and still be content and even happy because our satisfaction is now at another level and our source is beyond ourselves. That's an incredible statement. Our source is beyond ourselves. Yeah. Because if we consider the source of life to be the outer realms, it is limited to one side of the coin. It's as if like the inner realms and the outer realms are like the heads and tails of a coin, and it's like society is just seeing the tail, and it's like, yo, this is the end, you know. And imagine if we recognize there was another simultaneous dimension to what we think is 8 billion creatures living on a rock in the middle of nowhere. If there was a simultaneous and perhaps energy hidden collective nature to reality, intelligent collective nature. Anyways, Wilhelm Wundt says we speak of virtue, honor, reason, but our thought does not translate any one of these concepts into a substance. Yeah, again, they're qualities of being. Lee Hsien Loong says the world is a diverse place. Nobody has a monopoly on virtue or wisdom. Exactly, because it's like, if your philosophy considers the world, how can it be limited to self-belief? The world is so big, right? So even if we believe in the idea of knowledge, that means everything can update. That means there has never been smart or stupid people. There has just been activation points of awareness that are choosing the intensity that they receive and express. Literally, we're 8 billion antennas. We have access to a field, literally like an animal that put its head out of water, right? And the conscious waking state is individual solidity, and the unconscious deep sleep state is collective gas-like state, where it's as if we are intelligence is, but it has no content to be conditional to. So you can't have consciousness if there is no image. If there's nothing to see, this there was this man named Sri Ramana Maharshi. Somebody's like, Ramana Maharshi, I suffer from my ego, man. I've been suffering because of my ego and how I've been a person, and I've regretted. And Sri Ramana Maharshi's like, buddy, in the deep sleep state, there is no ego to suffer. So you, by the nature of your design, are a being beyond thought. So if the thought causes you misery, it's your choice. And I'm not saying we kind of like ignore the power and the advantage of emotions, but I'm just saying like a person chooses how much the world directs their attention. And that's what freedom means, You have control over your perception. Anyways, guys, I'll share one last quote from William Shakespeare. He says, "Some rise by sin, and some by virtue fall." Okay, let's find a better quote to end off with that. Saint Augustine. David Hume. David Hume. He says, "Heaven and hell suppose two distinct species of men, the good and the bad, but the greatest part of mankind float betwixt vice and virtue. Virtue would be an awareness to the union, vice would be an awareness of the rejection from the union." In certain divine circles, like mystical circles, the grand soul in the room, the yogi, let's say the guru of the moment, it could be that not all beings are meant to have the same kind of journey. Like when you climb a mountain, if 8 billion human beings were climbing a mountain to get to the top, they would recognize only as you progress to higher levels of reality, you find union with others who are putting in that much effort. It's as if there requires an effort towards establishing truth as an ultimate I don't want to say judgment, but as an ultimate wrap-up of knowledge. Guys, right now as I'm talking, a butterfly just landed on my 28th floor balcony fence, you know what I mean? I wish I can. I'm going to take a picture of this butterfly and show it to the listeners, you know, if it's possible. Okay, it's too far away and camera, zoom, pixel technology hasn't evolved. Alright. Anyways. At the end of the day, we're just an energy capsule. You know? And it's all about what ratio of our internalized energetic life relates to our externalized energetic life. I think that's a good way of saying it. I'll read this last quote from William Godwin. He says, innocence is not virtue. So he has a different view than the yogic view. He says, virtue demands the active employment of an ardent mind in the promotion of the general good. Yeah. So he's saying if virtue is conditional, the innocence of children doesn't know what that condition is to be considered as virtue. Yeah, so he's saying virtue, he's seeing the concept of virtue in two dimensions. I was sharing it in accordance to one, the first type of virtue. Anyways, no man can be, so I'll read it again. He says, William Godwin says, innocence is not virtue. Virtue demands the active employment of an ardent mind in the promotion of the general good. No man can be eminently virtuous who is not accustomed to an extensive range of reflection. What that means is, unless you are self-aware, if you're not self-aware, there is no virtuous man. You know, I'll kind of translate this quote as that. But anyways, guys, you know, be aware of how your mind is moving your body and how your body is moving your mind. And new episodes until 2022 is accessible to members, so members can access these videos at any time. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. Pretty much in this world, I would say this, that you can say it's all about activation or inactivity. That's it. There is no such thing as, I would say, again, the smart or the stupid. You know, it's all about how much the being's self-awareness has opened up to a collective context. And those beings who their self-awareness opens up to the collective context, life in some sense brings forth, you know, collective moments of being. You know, people don't realize being a parent is the most important job on the planet. That means if it was a job that would get paid, let's say in the future an advanced civilization pays you for your parenting, you know, this is way in the future. You know, but the idea is the advanced civilization's logic is in some sense alright, this human being is maintaining an environment of let's say solar development, SOULAR, not SOLAR. You know, that means intelligence animated by light. You know, pretty much light is the soul of our thoughts, you know. Just, you know, everybody is introducing the world to its future,
if they live in this world. And it's all about how you are making human beings aware of reality. That's it. You find a solution, your own solution to that question of what kind of human being are you allowing to enter the world, you know? And when I say that, that means how much has the individual, the human, the Homo sapien, this human being, understood of its inner ability, of its outer ability, and has understood that back in the day, outer freedom and inner freedom was force-based. Now it is cooperation-based. You know, like we can't ignore how we are a team of like 8 million human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere. So this crew, this sort of human crew has to align, you know, and it's pilots and it's designed in a way where if we had one collective human movement, this human movement's leaders will always change, right? So that means the concept of leadership is only something afraid if the time span is infinite, because it means the world doesn't change, right? And everyone's eyes are their real teacher. That means any child can learn from a teacher, from their parents, right? But the eyes of the child are what is moving the child. So your eyes are your greatest guru. That's why I'm saying go within. Because when you go within, you learn to accept life in accordance to a certain inner realm projection, then you live it. Then you have stability and certainty in what you do. That means think as if like you're a human being, that your opinion matters, but your life is all about trying to discover what your opinion is as you engage reality, right? And people are doing this in different ways. Multidimensional patience, you know, will lead to an advanced civilization. Thanks for listening, guys. Spaces.